right, today we have another episode of How Did I Get Here? The purpose of this show is really just to show people what is out there, what kind of jobs are out there that exist in the world. For people, who kind of aren't quite sure what they want to do with their lives, or maybe they've kind of realized they want to change. They've been doing the same thing and they realized, I'm tired of this. I want to do something new. I want to see what is out there. Maybe some people are trying to figure out what they really want to do for the rest of their lives. And that's something, that's very hard to figure out. If you could do anything, what would you do? Obviously, whatever you do will take a lot of work to get good and to be truly great at it. But to really figure out where you want to start and really how to start, that's really the hardest thing. How do you start? Once you know what you want to do, how do you get started? Well, hopefully here today, I'm here to help you find that path to that journey. Here I'm interviewing Aaron. Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about what you do? What is your official title for what you do?
Well, in terms of this coffee time board game that we're going to talk about today, Mr. MCEscher, thanks for having me on.
Of course.
In terms of the board game, I am one of the primary designers and also served to bring together a group of friends to create this game. It took talent from each one of us. We're 6 Davis locals, and I brought us together and was the lead designer for Coffee Time.
Well, that's always the dream, getting your team of friends together to make a product. That does sound like the dream. So, yeah, I can see this is Coffee Time. Today we're talking about a board game that would you say it was built and designed here in Davis?
It was designed in Davis. All of my friends had a part to play in the overall production. However, we manufacture it in China.
Really?
We had a lead from one of the game critiquers at Davis Cards and Games, and he suggested we go with MCEscher Games, a very reputable business, offices in California even, so somewhat local but also very far away. But the concept and the graphic design, the artwork, the copywriting, all of that done here in Davis, California.
Well, that's fantastic. So, let's see. Could you tell us, I guess, like a rough, just kind of overview of what this game is? I've played it and I quite enjoy it, but I think it'd be better to hear you describe it than to hear me describe it.
It's a coffee versus tea game. So we've built a game for coffee lovers or tea lovers if they want to play as the quote-unquote bad guys. So what has happened is King Tea has infiltrated the realm of time, and he seeks to change all of the world clocks to tea time. There'll be a rift in the realm of time, and it'll be tea time forever. Coffee will be vanquished. And the reason King Tea is doing this is he's jealous of how popular coffee's become. So you need to help Cup Joe and his coffee time friends, Thermos, Donette, and Little Miss Hotshot make their way to the realm of time and battle King Tea. So whether it'll be coffee time or tea time is up to the players.
Huh. Very interesting. Now, what would you say, I guess, was your part really in constructing this? I mean, you said you were able to get like a team of people, but once you had that team, what was really your part in it?
Well, I'm a natural networker, and I was having a lot of fun in a class, video game design class at Sacramento City College, and our final project for this video game design class was to create a prototype for a board game, because a lot of the things that are required to make a good board game would theoretically also apply to video game design. And it was more realistic that these students and I would be able to do a board game at this time in our lives. We couldn't create video games.
Yeah.
So the inspiration to get that team together was a final project. And I was always hanging out with my friends, and they knew I was working on this final project. I took 3 days off of my regular job just to work on this final project. And some friends, their main contributions were concepts, like my friend Stevie, who said, we should have the coffee heroes battling tea and crumpets. And that was hilarious, having these tea characters with their mindless minions of mayhem, the crumpets, which I had never heard of before that day. Another friend creates music with artificial intelligence, so we started creating tracks that players could play in the background from our website while playing the Coffee Time board game. My fiance is perfect at English grammar and punctuation and writes very good sentence structure. So she has worked on all of the copy related to the game. And another friend created the main nemesis, King T, and designed that character alone.
How long was it in between like the conception? Because you said there was a little bit of time where it was kind of like the idea metaphorically was kind of on a shelf. How long did you think it took you to really between conception and taking it off the shelf? What do you think was that? How long do you think it took you?
It took 5 or 6 years.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So does that mean like, so like throughout that whole time you were kind of just like slowly, or maybe I don't know how long it takes, but so maybe it's just the average amount of time to create a board game. But how would you what would you say to that?
Well, initially, because it was a final project for a class that I took, video game design, I did a lot of work really quickly and created a prototype, a working prototype that could be played in that class. But then it did take 5 years before it was ready to be produced, manufactured, and hit the game board shelves or the
I
game
gotcha.
shelves.
I gotcha. I gotcha. And so I guess really what kind of like brought it on? So like when you finished school, did you know you're like instantly, hey, someday I'm gonna make this into a complete living, breathing board game, or did you kind of just I guess let it rest? Was there something that made you realize like did you know instantly you wanted to do this and make it real?
Not immediately, though after creating the characters and the board, I was very excited. The work seemed really well done, meaningful, vibrant, exciting. Uh, but then I would bring it out every time I'd have an engagement with family or friends and there was an opportunity for a board game. And I kept receiving positive comments. And so that was reinforcing that this really could be worth pursuing further and developing.
Interesting, interesting. Um, so you said this took you roughly 6 years. Do you think I guess you took the board game class. Was there anything else that any other courses you'd recommend for people to take if they wanted to create a board game? Obviously, besides the video game and board game design class.
Yes, I don't think I've mentioned really, I'm a graphic designer.
Okay.
And I've known all my life since I had my first computer and a scanner and Adobe Photoshop. I've always known I wanted to do graphic design. And so that was kind of a base requirement to create the board and the characters and design them was being a graphic designer. So at Sacramento City College, I took quite a few graphic design courses until I got my certificate and a degree.
Okay. Okay. So, and that's what you recommend because I guess it makes sense. Like a lot of the board is all kind of picture. Sure, it's on cardboard and there are pieces, but I guess it's all got to be designed somewhere. The cover's got to be designed, and it all is obviously in graphic design. Very interesting. Okay. So, this is kind of going to be a kind of a weird question in this kind of space, but like what on average did you have to do when creating a board game? I guess it probably wasn't like a 9 to 5 kind of thing. You probably were doing your regular job in graphic design, then you probably kind of come home, I guess, and work on coffee time. Like how would you say like throughout those 5 or 6 years building it, like what was I guess what would that kind of look like?
Part of the secret of success in designing this project, which was a side hustle, are, is I used my vacation time and from work, I took some days off and I used that time to create the board game. And then when I would go on vacation, I would always make some way in the game design. So that's one of my secrets is using vacations and downtime to work on the game.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. And so what would you normally do on vacation? Obviously, I'm sure there's play testing. Would you just really have like a meeting with your other members who help you build this and you guys would take like an afternoon and try to work on that? Like what would you do during that creation process?
So sometimes I would be with a friend, and one time there was even some of the children there, not my children, their children, and we all drew characters and came up with ideas for characters.
Okay.
At other times, it would be let's play the game, and if there was some kind of incongruity with the rules, I would take feedback from the other players, and I'd take that seriously and incorporate it later into a better design.
So I guess you would say pretty much the way you start is like you create like a very, very rough outline of a board game. You create rules. You do all that pretty much on paper. And then really I think it sounds like the biggest step from that point is really just play testing and play testing and play
Yes,
testing.
that's true. Also, at the beginning of the design, I had to create a board, and I created a unique layout. I just, took a wild stab at a intricate looking board, and that gave me parameters to work with. I had these pathways for the heroes and an area, the realm of time for King T, and I gave myself these parameters and I had to work within them to make a game that would work for this new board I'd created.
Yeah, I have the board right here, and we can kind of see that there's kind of four entryway points. Three of them go straight to a center point, and the fourth kind of weaves in between those 3 points as well. That meets at the end of the center point, and there are 5 clocks at the top of this board, right? And behind that is the center point. So it looks like that was that your same original design, or did it kind of shift from this design?
That is what is unbelievable is that was my first design and it was on a whim and I just saw the potential with it. We have this looping path that would intersect the more straight paths and I created team path crossroads. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but it became a dynamic of the game. All of the paths meet in the activation chamber, and that had to be significant. So the board design started to dictate the parameters for my game design.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. And so, obviously, coffee time. You've talked a lot about how it's kind of the coffee versus the tea and the crumpets. It sounds like a very kind of like a American versus British imperialism kind of theme going on there. I don't know if that's what your intent was. That's kind of what I was thinking when I first saw it. Like, oh, coffee versus tea? Sounds like the British, or the American, Tea Party dumping of all the tea into the river kind of situation. Of course, all the coffee and tea's personified and brought to life here in this world. But that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yes,
Um,
I've had people point that out. Initially, I hadn't given it too much thought. I knew King T sounded like a powerful nemesis, but more recently, somebody even pointed out, is that the Mad King Henry? And maybe it is. Maybe subliminally, we created the Mad King Henry in King T, and then the Cup Joe, who's the primary hero, can be seen as your average Joe. The American who would have a cup of Joe. So
huh.
it really was deeper than we initially realized. But so far, people think it's a very fun concept, even people from England.
I certainly agree. It's certainly a fun concept. What really brought on this idea of coffee and tea? Was there something in your board game design class that really brought that on, or were you just, you're in school and you're just drinking a lot of coffee, and maybe that's really what the start was?
It's true. I based this off of things that I really liked. I like video games, I like board games, I like graphic design, and I was drinking a lot of coffee and still am to this day. Uh, though I do drink tea a little more often, and that's a initial response we always get. Well, I prefer tea, and a person might think this game's not for them, and I'm like, no, the tea and crumpets are playable characters. So if you prefer tea, you can go ahead and play as King Tea and the Roamer Crumpet.
That's true because it is kind of it's asymmetrical in its board game nature, right? So one group of people or individual may play as the bad guys, as you said, quote unquote bad guys, King T, which King T still has his own win conditions, so he can quite possibly win the game. And then there's a couple of players who play as the coffee folks, the quote unquote good guys. But it is asymmetrical. Can you tell me a little bit about I guess what inspired that? Because everyone's kind of like fighting. King T's the boss. Everyone's trying to go up to King T and fight his minions. And once you get past his minions, then you can fight King T himself. Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired that asymmetrical playstyle?
Yes, it was really required because I wanted this game to have a strong storyline. And the story had to play out during the natural gameplay. And it was impossible to have King T and the Crumpets interacting in play naturally without them being live playable characters. So I feel like it was a requirement that the story unfold and everyone has to be a playable character.
Yeah, I think you're right. It definitely adds something, and certainly adds its element of uniqueness. Because a lot of similar games will kind of have the enemies be kind of automated. They'll be played by players, but that's not really the focus. They're just like a side character that players will have to navigate and mitigate just so they move along this analog board. But here you've actually made them that the main focus for particular players. Like, hey, you are just King T, and you're trying to mess up the other player or characters. It does kind of have that D&D-esque asymmetrical way of playing where one person is the game master and everyone else is kind of in a way fighting that game master. Though I don't know if there are, I guess, the same elements as a game master. Would you say King T, whoever plays him, is a sort of game master, or you don't think it's quite that deep in its requirements?
It certainly feels that way. It might not be literal to the term game master. I've only played a limited amount of Dungeons and Dragons, which is a lot of fun. I've never been the master. But playing as King T, you do feel like your moves are more important because there's only two enemies or one King T player to play and a Crumpet, whereas there are four heroes. So you do feel like you have more of a significant effect on more players by playing King T and trying to cause the four heroes to lose the game.
Yeah, I will say I've played this a couple times, and usually I've always played as T. That's not true. Usually I played as T, but I've also played as the heroes a couple of times as well. But usually I figured that with King T there was a little bit more I don't know. I don't want to say balance, but I always kind of had that dungeon or game master kind of mentality where maybe I might need to take it easy on some first time players. And so usually if you're introducing it to a new group of people, the person who's most experienced would probably play King T. Would you agree with that statement?
I do agree that the more experienced players would be King T and the Roamer because they are independent. Their abilities are only unique to them. The four coffee heroes, they share a lot of the same playable rules. They have to go through the same process to move and to attack and to activate their powers on the activation button. So, yes, I agree.
Okay, okay. Um, yeah, I've always kind of I guess I kind of have that. I've played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons back in high school, and so I guess I still have some of that left over. And I played the game master a couple of times, not every time, but I did it a couple of times, and I still have that kind of mentality where I have the urge to like take it easy on the players. You kind of want to give them a fun time, but you don't want to just outright crush them. Like if you're playing a normal board game, you're playing chess. Your goal is usually it's to just crush your opponent. Maybe if you're introducing someone to chess, you're going to take it, easy on them so they can kind of be introduced to the rules. But I guess with this game, there is a lot of luck involved. Would you argue it's a primarily luck-based game?
I think that it is partially luck. However, if a player, whether good or bad, takes advantage of every opportunity that arises, they will probably win the game. I think somebody loses when there were strategies they could have implemented, or there was a time they could have used a certain card and they didn't notice that advantage. Kind of like chess, where if you don't notice an advantage, it ends up being a really big part of whether you win or lose.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So there are some tactical elements. I will say, all these little characters. The what is it? We have Little Miss Hot Shot. We have what is it? Thermos and Cup of Joe. Who's this? A donut fellow here?
Donette,
Donette. That's right.
our non-binary character,
Okay,
Donette the
interesting.
donut.
Would you say they all have different powers, and I think there are certain ways that you can use certain powers, and you can't really have them all going out once, but each one, depending on who kind of gets up to face King T, you can activate different powers. And so I guess there was a little bit of that's I think a lot of the strategy element. You can get cards that can give you certain abilities, but once you're fighting King Thermos, everyone gets different powers depending on who's really on that, I guess, on that spot on the big button at the end of the board. And so I guess that there's a lot of strategy in trying to think like, okay, who's most beneficial here? Who can we use? And sometimes those abilities, if you don't remember them, you can certainly miss out on a lot of opportunities. Or it could be the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah, one of the most fun parts of the game is choosing who you will be. If you are going to be a hero, you could be Little Miss Hotshot, Donette, Thermos, or Cup Joe, and each of them have their own perks and abilities. So Little Miss Hotshot is the fast character, so often she can help the other characters become faster if she shares her abilities. Donette's the magical character that allows the sharing of abilities to happen in the first place. Thermos has the best defense, and Cup Joe has the best attack. So you want to share your abilities with the other characters in certain situations, and then there is an activation button in the activation chamber where these characters can unlock a very powerful ability across the entire board if they get to that activation button.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So how long do you think it really took? I guess it's probably hard to I say off the top of your head, but do you have any idea like what kind of hours really you put into this board game between start and finish, really to bring it to life? That's a very big question. I don't know if you can't answer that one, that's kind of tough, but I'm sure it's a very lengthy endeavor.
Well, it takes about an hour to play, and I must have played it 100 times by now. So that's 100 hours of playing, enjoying it, also playtesting, and then many, many hours of design, and I'm still designing to this day. So I guess I could answer that by saying endless hours.
Endless hours. That's fair. If you keep doing it, it keeps being endless. Um, so I guess you are a graphic designer by trade. Do you think there was anything that you kind of like got in your job or anything beyond school that really helped influence this board game? Obviously, you had many people to help you, and I guess the power of friendship applies here. But was there anything else that you think really helped you bring this to life?
Well, I had inspiration.
Okay.
Honestly, Cuphead and Mugman were a little bit of an inspiration for our main hero, Cup Joe. And you could even kind of see this dynamism with who the characters could be in Nintendo games. King T kind of seems like Bowser, and Little Miss Hotshot could be Peach, Luigi could be Thermos, and you could have Toad, the donut, and Mario be Cup Joe. So there were inspiration growing up in things I liked, but mostly graphic design and a sense of fairness. In life, I just happen to be somebody who thinks people should be in situations that are fair. And I think that equated into being able to make a board game because it has to be possible to win if you're the enemies or possible to win if you're the heroes.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. Every asymmetrical game or board game that, if it's obviously tipped in one person's favor or one player character's favor, it's not really going to be fun for everybody else. So I guess that is a very important aspect of every game. Something that we all try to strive for in life, but of course that can be difficult. So I guess that's very interesting, and that is what makes a lot of games just good, just that fairness and trying to get everybody the equal opportunity to win.
Yes, yes. I could add on that since I had a team help with some of the decisions on how the game would play and the rules, we had 1,000 of these developed and manufactured, and I just had this itch that it wasn't quite fair yet, that the enemies were losing a little too often. So we actually came up with a brilliant idea, and we printed some extra cards that gave the enemies, T and Crumpet, some extra abilities. And we created a game patch, and we just slid these game patches right into the saran wrap of each of the 1,000 games we'd already developed. So that's how important fairness and having a good game out there was to us that we created a game patch for a board game, which is usually a term applied to video games.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of that before. A game patch for a board game. That's amazing. And if you thought it was important, then obviously, you got to do what you got to do. Usually there are expansion packs that usually fix this, but you were able to get in the whole game patch. That's amazing. So I'm really curious as to what kind of put you on this board game path. Would you say it was really just that board game class that really made you decide, like, all right, I'm gonna make a board game, or was it something, maybe you were inspired as a child and you kind of, is it something you always kind of knew in the back of your head?
Yes, as a child, I would play games with my family, my siblings, and I even drew out just paper and pen, colored pencils, a couple of board games in my time. So, yeah, there was a theme. And then a lot of video game design. If this coffee time could become a video game in the future, that would be amazing. For now, it's a board game. So yes, over time, I do have a history of creating games for family and friends.
Well, that's fantastic. I know I certainly grew up in a household full of board games. I think my father, he just has a shelf, like a whole bookshelf of nothing but board games. And it's a little chaotic because they're all different shapes and sizes, so it's a little bit like Jenga or Tetris or something. You got to like kind of fit everything. You pull something out here, something might fall out there.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a beautiful sight, and it's very comforting because that's what I grew up with. I grew up playing board games. And so, of course, I heard about a local Davis board game, and I wanted to get you on the show. I was very curious as to how this really came to be.
Thank you, MCEscher.
Oh, I'm just happy to help. So I know this game has a bit of a lore. This game has got a whole lore booklet, obviously along with the rules. Can you tell me a little bit about how this game, I guess, kind of goes? I guess you kind of gave me a little overview on the characters, and we've been kind of bouncing around the topic of how to actually play this game. But could you give me just like a rough, nice snippet about this is kind of how the game goes?
Yes, the Coffee Time universe is how I refer to it, and it's an ever-expanding universe. We've got 5 worlds, and they are interconnected. And we leave it to imagination on how these 5 worlds are interconnected. But that's why King T is working on 5 world clocks. You've got Coffee World, Donut World, Warp World, Crumpet World, and Tea World. And King T moves through those worlds, and different things happen along the way. So the coffee characters come from Coffee World, and then we've got Donut the Donut, and there's other characters from Donut World. Warp World is also utterly mysterious at this time. We will have expansion packs that start to dive into the mysteries of Warp World. For now, it's a boundary world between those who prefer coffee and those who prefer tea. Our Crumpet characters live in Crumpet World, and Tea World, a very elegant place where they have tea parties and moon gardens, and there's duchesses and knights and king tea and the royalty. So Tea World is the final world in this game, and if King T has turned all the other world clocks and finally Tea World to tea time, then the tea characters and crumpets win the game because it's tea time forever.
Tea time forever. Okay. But what about the mechanics? Can you give me a little rough overview? Obviously, you can't go into all the different mechanics, but just say like, yeah, this is in as simplest terms. This is roughly how the game, works mechanically.
Okay, so King T starts in Coffee World, and when he's working that world clock, all the coffee heroes have perks. They could move along their path faster. They can add 1 to their roll. So that's one of the dynamics for being in Coffee World. And in Donut World, the same thing happens for Donut. Now, Donut can move more quickly.
Okay.
And Crumpet World, the roamer, who is a zombie crumpet, feels the power of the full moon. And so every time the characters run into the roamer, he's twice as powerful.
Okay.
And then finally in Tea World, King T has these very special cards that he hasn't been able to play for the whole game, but suddenly he can hit the heroes with the powerful Ice Storm card, which can freeze them in place because we don't want cold coffee in this game.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So, and there is a lot of, I've played this, and there's a lot of dice rolling. That's primarily how a lot of combat is kind of resolved through dice rolling, which is something I was quite familiar with and I quite enjoy. So it's something that a lot of more complicated games that require whole books and volumes. That can be a little daunting for some people who just want something relaxing to play on a Saturday or Sunday evening. So this kind of meets that requirement. Just it's something it's not super complicated. Obviously, somebody has got to be well versed in the rules, but it's kind of easy to guide other players kind of in. You just kind of roll dice. You move your characters up the board. Then if you run to some combat, you resolve the combat through dice rolls. And of course, there's also cards which can kind of like mix things up. Kind of give advantages or disadvantages to other people. And that's really how it's resolved. That's kind of I want to say like to put it in the simplest terms. I think the way I would do it. Um, would you like to add anything to that? Kind of that little simple explanation?
Yeah, I think if somebody opens the box with their family or friends, have never played before, they will find familiarity in the individual concepts, moving forward to get somewhere by rolling a dice, battling other characters by rolling a dice, and higher roll wins. And then even this idea that King T is moving these world clocks, and if he gets to tea time in all five, the game is won by those heroes. I've seen that concept of progressing and having some kind of time limit as well. So it is familiar, each of these concepts individually, but this game is completely unique in how all of those concepts are applied.
I will say that clock mechanic is quite nice because it does add a little bit of pressure to the heroes. Obviously, if you're playing as King T, you want the clocks to go faster, but it adds pressure to the heroes, which a lot of games don't have. Where there's like a continuous pressure building and mounting. So there's a time limit. I mean, quote unquote time limit. It's an artificial time limit that can change between games, but it nonetheless provides a time limit and something to stress the heroes out. I did want to ask, so once you kind of like put this whole okay, you had the whole game, you were satisfied with all the mechanics and everything like that. What did you without really like I guess saying the names of the companies or people like really like what did you have to do? You have everything, digitally, maybe you've, drawn some examples or something on like some cardboard so you can play it like on a board, but like how did you actually take something that existed as an idea and maybe a lot of digital pieces. How did you make that into a physical box?
So back to being a graphic designer. If I wasn't a graphic designer, I don't think this project would have come to fruition. But what I'm able to bring to the design immediately is professionalism. I've been doing graphic design for 15 years or more, so I'm able to create a fresh, brand new, bright, and exciting look that people would be willing to purchase once the game hit the shelves. Also, important marketing. I do have some marketing skills and communication. When you have to get a game like this developed and you work with a professional manufacturer, they have a lot of requirements, professional requirements that you will have to meet. Some of them related to design, and being able to get through every one of those hurdles to get to a point where you could manufacture the game legally and professionally, that was a big part that I could have lost hope. You have to get it copywritten, little steps like that. Each one can seem difficult, but taking things one step at a time. This took me 5 years to develop because sometimes the next step seemed too big, but then there would be a point where I felt inspired and I would finally get over one hurdle at a time. And 5 or 6 years later, we were able to develop the game. Finally, finances. I had to take out a loan. I had to decide that this was important enough for me that I would take out the first loan in my life. Maybe I had a car loan, but that felt different. This was a loan for a professional venture. A venture or adventure implies some risk, so I had to put my money where my mouth was and develop the game.
Hey, sometimes that's what you got to do to follow your dreams, right? If you're not willing to really, take a small risk, then what is the point? And it seems to have paid off. This is a fantastic game.
Thank you.
Um, so I guess can you tell me a little bit about manufacturing then? What is I mean, I'd love to hear about all these bits and pieces in deeper detail, but can you tell me about manufacturing? Like, how do you? I'm holding a box here. Somebody obviously had to make this box. How does that how does that work? How does that happen?
Yes. It starts with shopping around and talking to friends and tracking down leads that friends give you and taking them seriously. So I started with one company I thought was going to manufacture this game, but typical thing happened. They initially estimated very low cost, and then that cost had tripled by the time they wanted me to give them my credit card information. So
Oh, jeez.
disheartening, and I had to find another company to work with. And step by step, email by email, probably 100 emails back and forth. Some upset moments when I got a prototype, but there were, to my estimate, 5 major mistakes with the prototype. And it was extremely frustrating because it was scary. All this time and effort spent working with this company, would they be able to provide me with a final product that was perfect? And we worked through the obstacles, and they did. In the end, I find no flaws with the production of this game. So I'm very happy with the final product.
Wow. I didn't realize it would be so much email, but I guess that's how everything works in the modern age. Um, and so, can you tell me a little bit about the copyright? Did you have to copyright different pieces? Or I guess you had to copyright the images for the characters. I'm sure that was a huge hurdle in itself. Is it a bunch of different copyrights? Is it one copyright?
Well, I'm no copyright expert. The first thing I had to decide is what's the difference between trademark and copyright, and I still don't really know to this day, but I decided Coffee Time was a work of art, and I wanted to protect the game board and the characters, uh, as well as the name Coffee Time. So I went through a copyright process. It wasn't too expensive, $60 or $80 or so, and it gives me some level of protection. However, I think I understand that overseas these copyrights wouldn't apply and protect my game, and that I had it manufactured overseas uh, kind of worries me a little bit. But also, if somebody decided to copy my game, well, it must just really be good. And I'm the original creator along with my friends, so we would just continue to develop it. And if some other person wanted to copy it, I don't think they'd have the love and passion and skill to continue to develop it and work with it. So I'm not too worried about the copyright, but it was an important step in the process.
Well, I guess that's certainly a nice way to look at it. I know there are a couple of little 3D printed miniatures within some of the games, and I know some games come with a little platform you put a little card in. Um, can you talk to me a little bit about kind of like I guess that transition into like 3D miniatures?
Yeah, that was really exciting. I always knew I wanted something like the Monopoly pieces with my game. It's just a superior product if you're able to supply that in a board game. What we have in every game already are standees, little cardboard or board characters that go into a plastic insert, like you said. So everybody gets those because that was what was possible to have manufactured at a reasonable price and included in the game. However, for promotional purposes, I printed 100 sets of miniatures for all 6 players, and that was just a fun journey in and of itself. 3D printers, surprisingly affordable. Ordered one, uh, downloaded the free slicer software, they call it, and free 3D design software. And I started to design these characters in 3D programming and then send them over to the 3D printer. And it was a whole side endeavor, and it was really exciting. And so the first 100 people to purchase a game were able to get a custom set of 3D miniatures.
I do have some of those miniatures here somewhere. Let me
Nice.
see. I got them here. Yeah, they're nice. Yeah, they came in this nice little sack, and they came. What is this? I think it's like a very coppery color here. But each of them are very nicely made 3D miniatures.
Yeah, we had different colors people could choose, gold, copper, purple, or silver. And the funny thing is, we had this 3D printer running for a couple of months straight in the living room. Each piece might take 10 minutes to print, and we had six prints per game and 100 of them to do. So I think that's 600 pieces that we had to print, and we even made some larger 3D prints just for fun. But it was really fun to have a robot or a 3D printer working in the living room months straight.
Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. And so I assume by straight you mean including nights, just like always.
To some degree. It would be running really late into the night when we did the larger prints, but when they were smaller prints, I just have to get up every 10 minutes and go and take one piece off and ready the next.
Okay, so there was a little bit of a, I don't know, fixing or adjusting that needed to be made every so often.
Yes, the 3D printer had a lot of errors initially. It was very hard to calibrate perfectly, but once we had it calibrated, it was humming. Another way of saying it was working very well with few and far and in between errors at that point. So it was worth the effort. A lot of work to learn how to 3D print and 3D design, but the results were really exciting to have custom miniatures in the shape of our heroes and villains.
Well, that's exciting. So what format did I guess you said like you kind of had to like fine tune it. What form did that fine tuning take place? Was that physically adjusting the 3D models, or was that more, I guess, like some kind of coding mechanism? How did that really play out?
Well, in the 3D software, for instance, when I was designing Cup Joe, he has a spoon that's attached to him, and that spoon was just too fragile. It would break off very easily in my 3D prints. So I kept going back to Blender, the software I would use, and making the spoon a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker with the 3D program until it was strong enough that it didn't break easily. So that was one fine tuning in the model itself, the 3D model.
Okay.
Other fine tuning came in the temperature of the bed of the 3D printer, the how quickly the filament would come out of the head of the 3D printer, and you have to flatten the bed because it's printing going up, down, left, right. You have to make sure that the printer bed is finely adjusted.
Hmm.
Lots of little things, little nerdy things about 3D printing and 3D design.
Huh, I guess that's certainly not something I would have thought of. You also, I think, wanted to mention something about game music and the artificial intelligence, I guess, therein, or I guess artificial intelligence as a whole.
Yes, one of my friends who came on the team last was really into using artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of software out there for different fields of artificial intelligence. He was focusing on music. So he was able to quickly fulfill a dream of mine I'd had all along, which is to have custom video game or board game music to go along with coffee time. He created 8 tracks that are available on our website, and they're created almost entirely by artificial intelligence. He would take music samples of music I liked, feed them into this software, and it would come out with something completely original that we could call our own. And there still is a human element. He makes human decisions to perfect what the AI generates, but that was a really exciting part in this process and makes our game stand out on its own, having music to play in the background.
Huh. I guess that's certainly not something I would have considered. Yeah, I often, well, there's a specific board game I play often with my family about trains, and we're always trying to, find like the right kind of music for that, which is a struggle, trying to get the right theme. But I guess if the game comes with its own music, that fixes that problem right there. Kind of sets a nice ambiance. I certainly know that always helps build, the atmosphere if you have some nice music playing in the background. Um, so after going through this whole process and building a board game, is there any kind of like tips you'd have for anyone else who would be building something like this? Would you recommend any kind of first steps or anything like that? Like, if you're going to do it, you got to do this.
Well, be prepared to put most of the work in yourself. If you're going to work with a team, they could help, but you have to keep them impassioned. You have to keep them on track, and you have to be able to complete all of the most difficult steps in the design and the manufacturing yourself. The more you can do yourself, the better. Depending on outside skills or letting a skill that you don't have be a hurdle could kill game design. So do your best. Don't have excuses for, well, I don't have that skill or I don't have the money. For instance, I could have hired an attorney to make sure that I was doing the copyright issue correctly, but I didn't let it be a hurdle. I did my best, and my best ended up being good enough for a board game, I think.
So it does sound like you did have to learn a lot of new skills in going on this venture. You had to learn how to do a lot of things yourself, but in doing that, you had a greater control over, I guess, the outcome.
Yes, nobody else could stop the project.
I guess that's a good way to put it. So was there anything that you kind of wouldn't have expected in the onset? I guess there's a lot of things you kind of mentioned that you didn't expect, whether it was the copyright or the 3D printing or really talking to a company to get this board game made. Was there anything else that really uh, you didn't expect but kind of showed itself?
Well, I think that I was well prepared for how difficult it would be in life. I don't think things just happen by themselves, or I don't think somebody wins the lottery. So I was actually prepared for most of the steps and most of the difficulty and the process, all the way up into having 1,000 of these games produced, and understanding they are not going to sell themselves. It's really tempting to think that I'll be found by a big board game distributor and they'll buy all of the games and sell them. But I gave myself 3 years, kind of a artificial deadline, but a lot of room to relax and figure out how to proceed with having this game now and getting it out there in the world. So I think I was actually well prepared for each step of the way because I knew it would be difficult and it would require real work. Almost every single game that I've sold, I really sold it myself through my own efforts. It didn't happen automatically.
That's very interesting. Um, so I guess when you say you don't believe people win the lottery, you don't believe like it's just not that easy. You can't expect life to be that easy. Sometimes you got to put the work in.
And then also, even having the game out there, I talked about how I created a board game patch. There's the matter of, are people playing it? We have 133 games out there to families and friends who could potentially be playing this at some point, have it on their game shelves. And are they able to figure it out on their own? Are the instructions well written? These are concerns that I think about often. For instance, recently, one of my team members and I created 40-something video tutorials, each 10 seconds or a minute long, that show how to play with a video and audio instructions because we want it to be successful. So that was one of the big surprises. Is after it was manufactured, I thought it might be done, but I was wrong. I needed to continue to improve the experience for those who purchase or get a game.
And so you were talking about earlier, you think you got a lot of help kind of in this creation from your local game store. You think they were able to provide a lot of help in kind of understanding how entering this world and how to enter it and how to go about it. You said you would think you got a lot of help from them?
Yes, I did get a lot of help from them, from knowing where to get it manufactured, to being on a couple of forms of media that I was unfamiliar with, like Twitch, and being on Board Game Geek, things I wouldn't have known about on my own. And they helped with our launch party, where we had many community members come and support the launch of our game, and we were even on TV. So Davis Cards and Games was really important for each of those steps.
Well, that's great. I actually was at that launch party.
Yeah.
That's where I got this game. That's where I met you.
Thank you for coming there
Oh, of course,
and
of
for the
course.
support and continued support.
Oh, I think it's just fantastic. A local board game being made in my hometown, I think that's fantastic. But to move forward, do you think there are any kind of stories, interesting stories that kind of occurred through this process?
Yes, something I didn't expect initially. Uh, the characters that I first designed weren't based off of any people in my life. However, as I started to develop expansions that are not yet released, I started to honor family and friends by creating characters with maybe a name that would refer to them in a way, sometimes directly, sometimes very indirectly. So it's fun to give my family and friends cameos as we develop this game in the Coffee Time universe further. For instance, Dottie the Honeybee Queen is named after my fiance's mother, Dottie, and so that was a way to flatter her. And I've done characters for my aunt and uncle and cousins as well.
Oh, that's very sweet. So you are making you're making expansions to this game as we speak. So that's very exciting. Is there anything you can really tell us about that? I mean, I'm sure you're working with the same company who produced and created this box. Are you still working with them? And I guess is it going to kind of take place in like is it going to be like pieces or are there going to be cards? Like how what goes through like making an expansion?
Well, MCEscher Games are the company that manufactures this. They'll come in at the last step when I finally have the game completely designed, so they don't help along the way. However, what we're going to do is have 5 expansions, one for each of the 5 worlds that King T goes through. So these expansions will be smaller, more affordable, possibly the type of game that you could play in the back seat of a car on a road trip.
Oh,
And each of the games will have at least one card, probably one card, that you could bring back to the original Coffee Time board game that will change the dynamics of play in a fun way. So if you buy one or all 5 expansions, you can also come back and have your first game, Coffee Time, the one we have here today, with fun modifications.
so but they are designed to be standalone, is what it
Yes.
sounds like. Okay, yeah, because I will say this it's a rather large box, and I think would be very. I mean, just as any board game would be very difficult, any large Monopoly-esque board game would be very large and difficult to play in the back of a car. So, and this one as well. So you're kind of designing some more things for kids in the back seat kind of deal, or adults in the back seat.
That's right. And this was a recommendation by the local game store that the expansions be smaller, simpler, more affordable. So that's part of the overall marketing process. And also, we don't want to be greedy. People invest a certain amount of money for our current board game. We want to cut them a break if they want to go along the journey with us and get the expansions. They should be more affordable.
Well, that's always nice, and I'm sure we appreciate it. Would you say there were really kind of any, I don't know, did you run across any board game jokes like within the industry or anything that really kind of stood out to you, that you thought was just kind of funny?
Well, one thing that's funny is all the coffee and tea puns out there that we use sometimes in the game, but also when we're doing our social media. There's so many coffee and tea puns. So that's a really fun aspect of the game. And then there are a couple things that can happen within the gameplay in super rare conditions that we say cause the game to glitch. And we acknowledge the glitches, and they're actually really funny. For instance, there's a wild card called Sprinkles that you could change into any of the item cards, and that's a part of the strategy. However, what happens if you turn a Sprinkles card into a Sprinkles card? And we say then it's glitched in place and you keep it for the rest of the game, but you can't use it anymore. So it's really fun to continue to play this game, and even I have not discovered all of the nuances yet, and they are delightful when I come across a way to play that hasn't been addressed before.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I guess to go into that further, I guess were there any big throughout this process? Were there any big changes that you kind of encountered that really made you have to, I guess, change your thought process? Was there something you didn't know in the beginning, which kind of fundamentally changed how you were building this game and kind of some adjustments you needed to make. Like maybe once you added like the 3D printer, that was like a fundamental change, or maybe it had something to do with the copyrights, and that kind of just showed you like, okay, I've got to like tighten up this so it makes it easier to copyright, or was there anything that just was a fundamental change within that process that you thought was important?
Well, the website development became integral to the game. Having the instructions inside refer people to the website where they could have the game music and they could see the video tutorials and an FAQ page. All of that became very important. But also, we started to expand our brand with the website. And one thing that I had done in my youth one time was use software called Game Maker Games to make a very simple Pac-Man like game on the computer. And I wanted to do that again, so I relearned on when I had a couple of days off how to use Game Maker Games. And on our website, you can find a game called Donut Dash. So we actually have breached into video game design already, and you get to have go into the donut world and have Donut collect donuts and avoid the hungry pups who are donut hole characters who
Hmm.
want to eat Donut. So he has to collect donuts and feed them, or else they're going to eat Donut. So that was really exciting, and to continue to explore the Coffee Time universe through our website.
Huh. It's not something I would have considered. Very interesting. I guess yeah, that is a big part of today's world is websites and things that really didn't exist that much 40 years ago. So, I guess another really big part of this that we haven't really talked about too much is getting your board game in board game shops. Can you tell me how that works? Is that kind of like a one-on-one thing, or is there kind of like some online forum? I know there's a I don't know. Please tell me.
Yes, we saturated the local market first, and I'm just a natural networker, so I knew most of the local shops that could hold the game in Davis, and they all took one or two or five games, even 10 games, one shop. So that was exciting to fill the local stores, but then I knew I had to start to venture out of town. And so far, my fiance and I have gone to West Sacramento and Sacramento, up to about five stores, and three of them said yes, they would carry Coffee Time. And that was very exciting. And then we become salespeople, and I always will go with either my fiance or another team member because it just plays so much better when one of you can fill in a gap if the other stops talking for a second. There's always more to say, and the excitement. We think that people want to make us happy and want to support us when they see how passionate we are and how we're working as a team to get this Coffee Time game distributed far and wide.
Well, that's really nice. I really like the idea of it kind of being like a one-on-one thing. You got to go on foot. You got to go to this place, and you just got to, I guess, market yourself and market the game. I think that's kind of a really cool idea. I would have thought there would have been more, kind of an online presence. But I guess if you really want to sell the game and get it in people's faces, you got to go out into the real world. So, and I think that's fantastic. But I wanted to talk about. I tried to talk about it a little bit in the beginning, but so there was a couple year gap between when you first built the game in school, and then you kind of like took it as far as you could. At that point in time, you thought you could take it, and there was a couple year gap or something like that.
Yes, so the initial prototype for that video game design class had me on good footing. There was a playable game, and then the initial excitement meant that I played it with family and friends quite a lot in the first 6 months or so. Then I would play it with family and friends less often. Finally, there was a year or two where Coffee Time and the concept just sat on the shelf until I showed my fiance, new fiance as of a couple of years, and she,
Congratulations.
thank you, will be getting married pretty soon.
Oh, oh boy.
And she was so excited about this coffee time game and immediately started critiquing it and improving it. And it was so delightful to find out that my partner really genuinely loved the project and wanted to take it to the next level with me.
Well, I guess that's heartwarming. That's really sweet. I'm trying to think. Oh, so you also wanted to talk about some more of the basics of coffee time.
Yes, I think it's worth saying that it's a family and friendly game. We have it, it's lighthearted, so good for anyone. We have people of all sorts purchasing it from us, from high school students and college students who say they really like board games, to older people who want to try it with their family. So it is very eclectic in who can play it. It's an introduction to strategy games, probably a little less complicated than Monopoly, or maybe equivalent to Monopoly. So it even has some Dungeons and Dragons dice in there. So there's these elements that are an introduction to strategy games for ages 8 and up. So it's good to learn how to play with a diversity of some very young people and hopefully somebody who's played the game before.
And where, I'm sure it says here on somewhere, how many players is 2 to 6 players? Okay, 2 to 6 players. And there, of course, there are various adjustments on, who plays what or how many players there are for certain amounts of people. Sometimes if if it's just 2 players, you may play as multiple characters. But I guess yeah, that's kind of the thought. And I've played it before. It's very kid friendly, and it's something that's you can definitely teach your family in an afternoon for a fun filled afternoon. If you wanted to really know more about it, you can go online and you can simply search "Play Coffee Time" and you should be able to find what you're looking for. All right, I think that's all we have for today's show. Is there any final remarks you'd like to make, Aaron?
Well, the characters all like to say, come hang out with us. It's a latte fun. MC Escher.
All
Those are
right.
my parting comments. Thank you for
Oh,
having
you
me
bet.
on the show today.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show, and I was really excited to learn how a board game is made. Now I know. Thank you so much. You have a great
Thank you,
day.
sir.